We have everything we need to take the lead in the vehicles of tomorrow. And we're positioning Canadian workers and businesses to seize that opportunity. That's why today we're announcing a series of strategic investments that will shape the future of mobility and advance manufacturing in Canada as part of a coordinated plan to build a stronger, more competitive, more independent country. Our strategy rests on 5 pillars. First, accelerating investment in Canadian auto manufacturing. Second, rationalizing emission reduction policies to focus on the outcomes that matter to Canadians. Third, strengthening domestic demand by making electric vehicles more affordable and reliable for Canadians. Fourth, establishing a comprehensive trade regime that strengthens the competitiveness of our auto sector. And fifth, protecting Canadian auto workers from the immediate pressures while helping them bridge to the future.
That is Prime Minister Carney today. Mark Carney announced the federal government's new automotive strategy. And as you heard, there are 5 tranches there. But really the big headline that everybody's talking about are these big changes to the policy concerning electric vehicles. Basically, mandates out, rebates in. So those mandates were, I guess, a Trudeau-era policy. They would have required 60% of all new cars to be electric by 2030 and 100% by 2035. Those are gone, and now there are rebates of up to $5,000 if you buy an electric car, a little bit less if you buy a plug-in. But Carney still insisted that Canada is still a climate leader in spite of having cut not just this, but a number of other policies from the Trudeau era. For example, Carney says they will be introducing stronger greenhouse gas emission standards for new vehicles coming out after 2027 to encourage automakers to produce more zero-emission vehicles. And he also said that thing about rationing the emissions strategy. So let's get some reaction to that. Of course, I'd love for you to give me some reaction on the text line. But right now we have on the line Joanna Kyriazis. She's a policy director at the think tank Clean Energy Canada. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So lots of stuff in there. Let me get your overall take, though. What do you think of the overall strategy that was announced today?
We were very pleased with the auto strategy released this morning. Last year, Canada was one of the only countries in the world that saw EV sales decline. And I think there were a lot of questions about what direction we were headed. But today's strategy sent a very clear signal that Canada is back. We're all in on EVs. Our Prime Minister wants us to be building EVs here in Canada, and he also wants to help more Canadians get behind the wheel of one.
Okay, so I'm not seeing the same thing you're seeing. So maybe you can explain that to me, because to me it looks like he's pulling back from EVs because he's taken off the mandate that we actually have to have a certain amount and kind of leaving it up to the market. And also kind of incentivizing consumers to buy cars. So how do you take a more positive spin off that?
Yeah, so the headlines are focusing on the scrapping of the EV sales mandate, and it's true that's going to be repealed, but the federal government is replacing that mandate with a similar policy, so tailpipe emission standards that would get us to similar levels of EV sales in the future. They put in the announcement 75% EV sales by 2035 and 90% EV sales by 2040. Mm-hmm. So these are regulations that also require car makers to shift to cleaner and cleaner vehicles. They offer more flexibility in the early years where car makers could decide to, improve the fuel efficiency of gas cars to do it or sell more hybrids. In addition to selling more EVs. But as the standards ramp up and get stricter and stricter, then car makers have to sell more EVs in order to meet their annual requirements. So it's a similar direction of travel, just a slightly different route of getting there.
Okay, so that's interesting because, as you say, the headlines have all been about EVs, and we've had a lot of people calling in today, and basically everybody's been saying, yeah, we're ready for electric vehicles, but it's going to take time. They're the future, but it's going to take time. But this sounds like you have a more practical, and the government, I guess, a more practical approach, which is let's do both things at once. Let's promote electric vehicles and also emissions reduction. Is that fair?
Absolutely. I think there's a recognition that the car industry is facing a lot of uncertainty globally, with trade and tariff wars, and needed a little bit of a breather. But this policy, the tailpipe emission standards, that's the policy the EU is using to drive its EV transition. And there we're seeing everything that you want to see from a policy like that. More EV models are available in the EU at better price points. Mm-hmm. There are higher levels of EV uptake. We're almost, 1 in 3 new cars in the EU are now EVs. And they're seeing real reductions in vehicle emissions. So it is a similar policy as the sales mandate, but just offers slightly more flexibility. And then, of course, we have the rebate program, which I personally did not expect to be coming back federally. So that was great news. And some pretty significant investments in the national charging network as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to say that we did have a lot of people who expressed some cynicism about the rebates because those cars are super expensive. I know that the government does seem to have finessed it a little bit so that if it's over 50,000, under 50,000, that qualifies. But what about that network? If EV cars are the future, it does seem that the infrastructure is holding everything back right now.
Well, our public charging network in Canada has been expanding rapidly. Right now we have 36,000 charge points available across the country, and we've seen the network grow by 30% each year for the past few years. Quebec, in particular, has one of the best charging networks in North America.
Yes, but when you leave Quebec, it's kind of a wasteland.
Depending, yeah. I'm from Ontario, but now I live in BC, and even BC's is better. Ontario still has work to do. Yeah. But I'll just say we're working on it, and the package of policies announced today is really going to help because when that EV sales mandate was paused late last year, charging deployments stalled. There was no kind of clear direction of where the country was going and whether they were going to get a return on their investments because they didn't know, how many more EVs would be on the road year after year. Mm-hmm. But this mix of policies, the direct financing of charging deployments, the EV rebates that are going to get more people buying EVs here in Canada, and these tailpipe emission standards, which send, a long-term market signal that we want car makers to shift to EVs, that's all going to support the further build out of our charging network for sure.
Although maybe I'm misunderstanding you, but I thought you said that the emission standards would be like better or equal to an electronic vehicle. Like the technology exists to get it down to almost negligible amounts. Is that not what you said?
I said it's sending a long-term signal that we're moving towards EVs, which is the exact sort of market signal the private sector needs to invest in charging infrastructure, knowing that there will be more and more EV drivers on Canadian roads every year.
Well, I think it's instructive that Doug Ford threw his support behind this because, of course, the automotive industry has been badly hit. But there is this sort of thing in the air about, Canada's going to start manufacturing our own EVs. Do you see that in the future?
Yes, I think Canada's EV battery supply chain is ranked second in the world for its potential. Over the last, 5 years, we've attracted $50 billion in EV and battery related investment. Now, and we were set to start producing more and more EVs. Right now, we produce one plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, the Chrysler Pacifica, and we were producing a fully electric Dodge Charger until the production was paused. Mm-hmm. But we had other plans. Ford Motors was going to be building EVs in Oakville, Ontario. Yep. Honda was planning to in another part of Ontario. I think now we are less reliant on the Detroit Big Three for our EV future because of the various projects that have been canceled and the layoffs that we've seen. But Canada seems to be looking for new partners, whether it's trying to attract investments from Chinese car makers or German car makers or South Korean car makers, all of whom remain committed to EVs.
All right. Well, thanks so much for your perspective, Joanna. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me on today.
Okay, that's Joanna Kyriazis. She's a policy director at the think tank Clean Energy Canada.
I'm Dylan Playfair.
And I'm Tyler Smith.
We're putting loneliness in the penalty box by talking to some of our favorite athletes about the importance of friendship.
This is Bromance.
Bromance is brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers, proudly Canadian-owned and operated. Charm has been part of your love stories and bromances for over 50 years. And you can find Bromance on the iHeartRadio network or wherever you get your podcasts.